My 10th birthday felt like a world wrapped in innocence. The kind of day where nothing feels complicated, where the biggest decisions are whether to choose chocolate or vanilla cake, and where friendships feel like the only thing that truly matters. My name is Emily, and back then, life had no sharp edges, no hidden meanings, no wounds pretending to be memories. Everything was simple. Everything was light. And Jake was a part of that light. Jake wasn't my cousin by blood, but we grew up calling each other family, acting like siblings in every family gathering, laughing at jokes nobody else found funny, sharing snacks, secrets, and every silly thing our young hearts took seriously. That day, I remember sitting outside near the garden where the balloons were tied to the fence, gently swaying in the breeze like they were breathing. There was music inside, kids screaming while playing tag, someone cutting slices of cake too uneven to be fair, and yet it all felt perfect, because I wasn't paying attention to any of it. I was sitting with Jake. We were talking about how I had just broken up with my boyfriend of one day. Yes, one day. And we laughed like it was the most dramatic heartbreak in the entire world. Childhood heartbreak always feels bigger than it is, because it's the first time your chest feels something unfamiliar. I remember telling Jake, "I guess I'm single again," exaggerating it for humor, and Jake laughed in that quiet, half-teasing way he always did. Then he said something I didn't expect, not in a serious tone, but in a joking, carefree way. "Well then, I guess we should date each other." And I laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh where you forget your breath for a second. So I said, "Yeah, sure, let's date." Thinking it was just one of those childhood pretend moments. One of those things that fade as soon as the conversation ends. I didn't think anything of it. But the strange thing is, after that day, Jake didn't call. He didn't text. Not that we were the type to talk every day before, but something was different. Like after the words were spoken, silence took their place, and I didn't understand why. A whole year passed, seasons changed, school ended, summer came and left, and suddenly it was my birthday again. And like every year I invited Jake, and he came, but he wasn't alone. He came holding someone's hand, a girl I had never seen before, someone who looked confident, like she knew she belonged beside him. Everyone talked about how cute they were together, how happy Jake seemed, and I stood there with a strange heaviness I couldn't explain. I wasn't jealous. At least I didn't understand jealousy back then, but I felt something shift inside me. Something like a quiet question. Why did he say we should date? Why did we never talk about it again? Why did he pull away from me after that? I watched him laugh with her the way he used to laugh with me, casually mentioning how they met, how she made him feel lucky, how they had inside jokes, the same kind he once had with me. And suddenly, my 10-year-old heart realized something I did not have words for back then. Sometimes what feels small to you means something entirely different to someone else. Sometimes a joke is not a joke. Sometimes a moment plants a seed you don't know how to water, and sometimes someone walks out of your life quietly, not because they don't care, but because they don't know how to stay. That night, when the party ended and everyone left, I sat alone in my room holding the birthday card Jake had given me. Just a simple happy birthday, nothing personal, nothing special. I remember thinking, why does this feel like something ended before it ever began? I didn't know it then, but that day was the first time I experienced loss without losing anything. The first time silence hurt. The first time I looked at someone and realized they were no longer mine in the way they once were, even though they were never really mine at all. And that's where the story of me and Jake truly begins, not in the laughter we shared, but in the quiet distance that grew between us, distance I didn't understand then, but one I was destined to feel more deeply as the years went on. 6 or 7 years passed like chapters you flip through too quickly, never realizing which page changed everything. And by the time I looked back, childhood had stretched and reshaped itself into early teenage years, where feelings suddenly had weight, where words no longer floated harmlessly in the air, but landed somewhere deep inside the chest. Jake and I still saw each other at family gatherings, birthdays, holidays, those same familiar faces laughing in the background. But something between us had shifted into an unspoken understanding, or maybe an unspoken distance. He had his life, his friends, his relationships, and I had mine, though I never again joked about dating the way I had when I was 10. I had learned that even laughter can leave echoes behind. By the time I was 16, I started dating someone, Johnson. He was kind, simple, warm in a way that felt steady, like a soft light in a quiet room. He listened when I talked, remembered the little details, asked about my day not because he felt obligated, but because he genuinely wanted to know. There was no confusion with him, no guessing, no history tangled up in childhood memories. And for the first time, I felt like life could move forward instead of spiraling back into questions I never had the courage to ask Jake. But the thing about unresolved stories is that they don't stay unresolved forever. They wait. Quietly, for the moment everything collides. I didn't tell Jake about Johnson at first, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I didn't think Jake would care anymore. We were just family friends now. That's what I told myself. But the day I finally mentioned it, it was casual. So casual that I didn't even see the storm gather behind his eyes. We were at my aunt's house, everyone outside, barbecue smoke in the air, kids running around like little fireworks. And I was standing near the kitchen counter pouring lemonade when Jake walked in. We talked the way we always did, polite, slightly distant, like walking carefully around the edges of something fragile we couldn't name. And without thinking, like I was just updating him on my life, I said, "I'm dating someone. His name is Johnson." I still remember the exact second the light in the room changed. Jake's face didn't twist dramatically. It didn't break into anger instantly. It shifted slowly, like a curtain being pulled down, like something warm turning cold. He stared at me, really stared, as if seeing me for the first time, or maybe seeing me for who I used to be. Then he stepped closer, voice low, almost trembling, but not with sadness, with something sharper. "So that's it?" he said. I didn't understand what he meant, so I said confused, "What do you mean?" And he looked at me like I had betrayed something sacred, something I didn't even know existed. "You were supposed to be with me," he said. I laughed at first, because how else do you respond to something that makes no sense? But he didn't laugh. He didn't blink. His jaw tightened and he said, "You cheated on me, Emily." The words hit me like cold water thrown in my face. Cheated. On him. On what? On a joke spoken when we were 10? On a pretend relationship that was never real? But to him, it was real. Maybe not then, maybe not out loud, but somewhere along the way he had built something in his chest, something I had unknowingly walked away from. "Jake," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. "We were kids. We weren't serious. That wasn't real." But the moment the words left my mouth, I wished I could take them back, because they cut him. I could see it. His expression twisted, something between disbelief and heartbreak. But what scared me most was the anger underneath it. "Not real?" he repeated, voice rising like thunder before a storm. "You think that was a joke to me? You think I spent years waiting for you because of a joke?" And suddenly, everything made sense and didn't make sense all at once. The silence. The distance. The way he pulled away after my 10th birthday. The girlfriend he brought to the next one. The unread messages that never existed because he never sent them. He had been waiting. He had been holding on to something I didn't know we shared. And I, without intending to, broke it. I didn't know, I said, tears burning but refusing to fall. You never said anything. He laughed, but the sound wasn't laughter. It was something painful, jagged, exhausted. I shouldn't have had to, he said. You should have known. And that's the thing. How do you know something that was never spoken, never shown, never written anywhere except in someone else's heart? How do you honor a promise you didn't realize was a promise? I wanted to explain, to apologize, to unravel the knot forming between us. But before I could, Jake turned away, stepping outside, leaving me standing in that kitchen with lemonade still in my hand and a silence heavier than anything I had ever felt. Outside, life continued. Laughter, music, plates clinking, the world spinning, unaware that something had cracked open inside us, something that would never return to what it once was. And for the first time since childhood, I realized something terrifying. Some bonds break quietly, but the echo of them shatters everything. A year passed after that confrontation, a full year where we didn't speak, didn't text, didn't even make accidental eye contact across rooms where we used to sit side by side without thinking. Silence grew like ivy across everything that once felt simple between us, covering it in something tangled and heavy, something neither of us knew how to untangle. And yet, in Jake's mind, we were still a couple without conversations, without promises, without beginnings. It was like he had frozen us in a moment that I didn't even realize had mattered. Time didn't pause for me, though. Life moved forward, school changed, friendships shifted, and birthdays came and went with new people, new conversations, and a growing sense of maturity that taught me how feelings evolve, how memories soften. But for Jake, that single moment in our childhood remained untouched, unchanged, preserved like a photograph kept in a drawer no one ever opens but never throws away. Years passed, 5, 6, maybe 7, and we became adults without realizing when exactly childhood had ended. The family gatherings became less frequent, the laughter became quieter, and the faces around us changed as new cousins were born, and older relatives disappeared slowly into distance. Life moved. But every time I'd see Jake, not often, but often enough, there was this shadow between us. Something unspoken, but loud. Something that sat in the room whether we acknowledged it or not. And sometimes, in those moments where conversations turned loose and playful and nostalgic, Jake would bring it up again. Not gently, not angrily, but almost proudly. Like a story he had told so many times that it no longer belonged to reality. Emily cheated on me once, he would say, half laughing, half daring people to react. Everyone laughed because it sounded like a joke. Childhood innocence, a silly memory, something harmless. But I knew it wasn't harmless to him. And what hurt wasn't just the words, it was the way he said them. Not like a memory. Not like a joke, but like a truth. Like something he still carried as proof of something. Maybe love, maybe heartbreak, maybe loss, maybe pride. People would look at me and ask, "Really? You two dated?" And I would smile in that polite way you learn when you have to protect yourself without making a scene. "No," I would say softly. "We were just kids." But Jake wouldn't let it go. He would add details that never existed, like how we almost kissed or how he waited for me for years. Things that didn't happen but maybe did in his mind. At first I thought he was teasing. But the older I got, the more I realized he wasn't joking. Not even a little. That childhood moment had become a memory carved into him. Unchangeable, uncorrectable. To him I had been his. And I had broken something. Something he never named. Something he never asked for. Something I never agreed to. There is a kind of guilt that comes from hurting someone without knowing you ever held the power to hurt them. It's the kind that settles quietly, like dust on shelves you didn't know existed. And even though I knew, I knew that there had been no relationship, no promise, no love story between us. Some part of me felt responsible for the wound he still carried. Not because I caused it knowingly, but because I never understood it existed in the first place. But the strangest part, the part that stays with me even now, is how his story became real simply because he repeated it often enough. People believe what is told with confidence. Pain retold becomes truth. And somehow, without meaning to, we became characters in a story I never chose to write. A story where I was the villain. A story where I was the girl who cheated. A story where love existed only on one side, unspoken, unanswered, and eventually, unforgettable. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if, that day on my 10th birthday, I had laughed a little less, or answered differently, or understood that even jokes can live forever in someone else's heart. Sometimes I wonder if Jake ever realized that the story he holds so tightly isn't about betrayal. It's about a child who loved quietly, secretly, and never learned how to let go. And sometimes, when I hear him tell the story in that same half-laughing voice, I don't feel angry anymore. I just feel sad. Sad for the children we were. Sad for the way memories twist themselves into myths. Sad for the love that was never given the chance to speak, so it had to scream in other ways. Because the truth is simple, painfully simple. There was never a relationship. Never a promise. Never a confession. Never love spoken aloud. There were just two children. One who said something in playful innocence, and one who took those words and built a universe out of them. And that is the real heartbreak. Not that we fell apart, but that we were never really together, and yet somehow we still broke. The day of my wedding to Johnson was supposed to be the beginning of peace, a clean page, a doorway into a life where love wasn't complicated, where past echoes couldn't follow me into new rooms. The decorations glowed soft gold, flowers, threaded like fragile dreams along the walls, and music floated gentle and warm through the hall as if the world itself was blessing us. I remember holding Johnson's hand on stage, fingers intertwined, steady and safe, his smile calm and sure, the kind of smile that makes you believe everything ahead will be okay. Guests clapped. Camera flashes sparked. My mother whispered prayers under her breath, and for a moment, I truly thought happiness had found me. But life has a way of testing even your brightest days. I didn't see Jake at first. I thought maybe he hadn't come. Maybe he had finally let go of the story he had been holding for years. But then, in the middle of laughter and celebration, he stood up. Not in silence, not quietly, but loudly. He walked straight to the stage, past tables and guests who fell silent one by one, like dominoes collapsing into quiet shock. And before I could understand what was happening, he reached toward the DJ and took the mic, just took it, like he believed he had the right. The music cut off sharply, and the hall filled with a stillness so heavy it felt like the room was no longer breathing. Jake's voice echoed through the speakers, raw, unfiltered, shaking with something not love, not hate, but the burning memory of everything he had held on to alone. "She cheated on me," he said, staring directly at me, not blinking, not looking away. "She cheated on me once, Johnson. And she'll do it to you. She always will." The words hit like stones thrown at glass, shattering every smile, every blessing, every warm hope I had tried to build around myself. There was a gasp, one collective inhale that felt like the entire hall was swallowing me whole. Johnson's parents looked at each other, at him, at me. Confusion turning into doubt. Doubt turning into judgment. The whispers spread like wildfire, the kind that burns without sound. Cheated. lied, untrustworthy. Words I had never lived suddenly became my identity in that room. I could barely move. It felt like my body had turned to stone while my heart was still thrashing beneath my ribs, desperate to defend itself. But no words came. Because how do you explain something that happened when you were 10? How do you explain that you never knew someone held your laughter like a vow? How do you say there was no promise in front of 100 people who have already decided who you are? Johnson stood beside me, frozen. His parents stood up. His relatives followed. Their expressions were not angry. They were disappointed. And disappointment is heavier than anger. It sinks deeper. One of Johnson's aunts looked at me like I had ruined her son's destiny. One of his cousins shook her head slowly, like I had confirmed every fear she ever had about trusting women. Johnson didn't let go of my hand, not immediately, but his grip loosened, slowly, painfully, like watching a bridge collapse one rope at a time. And that hurt more than words. The guests began leaving, quietly at first, then in a wave. A celebration dissolving into shame. The hall emptied like someone had opened a door and let all the air out. And when the last of Johnson's family walked out, when the music had stopped, when the lights felt too bright, when my body felt too heavy to stand, that's when Jake approached me. Not with regret, not with apology, but with a calmness so cold it felt inhuman. He stood in front of me, eyes steady, and said, "This is your punishment." Punishment. The word crawled under my skin, sharp and cutting. I could barely speak, but somehow the words came out, trembling and small. Punishment for what? Because I genuinely didn't know. For a joke spoken when we were children? For not loving him when I didn't know he wanted me to? For living a life he was never promised? For growing up? For choosing happiness he wasn't a part of? Jake looked at me like the answer should have been obvious. But it wasn't. It never was. And that is what broke me. Not the scene he created, not the humiliation, not the whispers I knew would follow me for years, but the realization that I had been punished for something I had never agreed to, never understood, never even knew existed. Jake walked away that night like he had won something, like justice had been served, while I stood in the middle of the stage, alone, trembling in a wedding dress that suddenly felt like it didn't belong to me anymore. Johnson stayed for a few more minutes, silent, torn, broken in ways I didn't know how to fix. And then he left too. Not with anger, not with hatred, but with the heavy sadness of someone who didn't know what to believe. And that was the moment I realized some heartbreaks don't come from love. Some heartbreaks come from the stories people write about you without your consent. And the worst part is, the world believes the storyteller. After that wedding day, after the silence, the shame, and the heartbreak that settled like dust on every corner of my life, my parents made a decision I couldn't have made for myself. They moved us to another state, far from the whispers, far from the families who had turned my story into entertainment, far from the shadow of a boy who didn't know how to let go. It felt strange to leave behind everything familiar. The house I grew up in, the streets I once called mine, the backyard where childhood still lived in pieces. But sometimes survival looks like running, and sometimes running is the only way to breathe again. In that new city, in a life that felt like a blank page, I met David. He wasn't someone dramatic, loud, or intense. He was steady, calm, kind in a way that didn't demand attention. He was my father's friend's son, someone who visited often, someone who noticed without staring, someone who listened without waiting to respond. And slowly, gently, things began to feel possible again. Our families discussed marriage, and there was no rush, no pressure, just understanding. When we got married, it didn't feel like starting over. It felt like finally beginning. But the past, no matter how far you run, has a way of finding its way back. Sometimes not to destroy you, but to test how much you've grown. One night, a few months into my marriage, David sat beside me quietly, his phone in his hand, his expression thoughtful, not angry. He said, "I got a message today," and I knew. Without seeing it. Without hearing the rest. My heart sank, but my voice remained calm. "From Jake," I said. David nodded. Jake had written, "She cheated. She was mine. She'll break you like she broke me." The same echo, the same story, the same wound he carried like a medal he didn't know how to put down. I felt my hands go cold, the room suddenly too quiet, too sharp. Because I thought I had finally escaped that chapter, and yet here it was again, asking to be understood, forgiven, healed. David wasn't angry. He didn't shout. He didn't accuse. He simply asked, "Tell me the whole story." And I told him, everything, my 10th birthday, the joke that lasted too long, the silence that followed, the confrontation years later, the wedding that shattered itself under the weight of a memory I never knew existed. I didn't cry while telling it. I didn't break. I just spoke, calmly, honestly, because the moment you no longer fear a story is the moment it stops controlling you. When I finished, David didn't say much at first. He just looked at me with the kind of understanding that feels like shelter. Then he laughed. Not to mock, not to belittle, but in disbelief. "He's holding on to something that happened when you were 10? He said, "Emily, that's not love. That's obsession." And for the first time, someone said the truth out loud. The truth I had never found the courage to name. The next day, David called Jake. Not to fight. Not to threaten. But to end it. He told him, voice steady and unshakable, "Don't contact us again. Don't drag your pain into someone else's life. Move on. Get help." I don't know what Jake said. I only know that after that call, everything finally went silent. Months passed. Seasons shifted. Life became warm again. Morning coffee together. Laughter that didn't feel heavy. Love that didn't hurt. And then one afternoon, sitting at the kitchen counter scrolling through messages I hadn't opened in weeks, I heard Jake's name again. But this time not from a phone, not from a whisper, but from a relative passing news casually, like weather. Jake was in a mental health facility now. He had been for some time, and they said that even there, even in rooms built to heal, he still told people the same story. My girlfriend cheated on me. My heart didn't break the way it once did. It didn't ache or tighten or collapse. Instead, it softened. The way you soften when you finally understand something deeply. Jake wasn't a villain. And I wasn't a villain either. We were just two children who stood at the same moment but saw different worlds. He loved me quietly, silently, privately. And silence can distort love into something unrecognizable. He held on when I didn't even know there was something to hold. And by the time he tried to let it out, it was already too heavy to carry. Sometimes love that is never spoken turns into pain. Sometimes pain turns into memory. And sometimes memory becomes a home someone never learns to leave. I don't hate him. I don't blame him. Sometimes people break in places no one can see. Sometimes the world fails to teach them how to let go. My life now is peaceful. David and I laugh easily, speak gently, love simply. And when I think of Jake, I don't think of the wedding, or the whispers, or the humiliation. I think of balloons and sunlight and two children laughing on a birthday afternoon, before words had consequences, before love had weight. That's the memory I choose to carry. Because healing isn't forgetting, it's deciding what deserves to stay in your heart. And moving forward isn't running, it's choosing peace over pain. We don't always get to choose who loves us, but we always get to choose how we continue living. And I chose to heal.